Hello, welcome to a very exciting introductory tutorial to 2D skeletal animation. I am going through this tutorial to teach you how to create a super cool 2D character animation walk cycle with the creature animation tool. So sit back, relax, and let's get started with this tutorial. Now, before we begin, I want to say that there are different kinds of animation for 2D, and one of them is frame-by-frame animation, which you are seeing on screen right now. Frame-by-frame animation requires you to draw every single pose or frame of the character in order to produce animation. Now, it can produce some amazing and gorgeous results, except it's a bit more time-consuming. So the other alternative to frame-by-frame animation is skeletal animation, which we are going to focus for the purposes of this tutorial, and that's what Creature is capable of producing. Now, skeletal animation is capable of producing also some amazing results, maybe not as flexible as frame-by-frame animation, but they're in general a bit more efficient in terms of time, and in many games, skeletal animation is more suitable for that sort of medium. Here's an example of skeletal animation. As you can see, it's also pretty cool, and you can produce some really compelling results with skeletal animation given the proper training, the proper tools, and the effort. So let's get started to see what skeletal animation is all about. Right, to start with skeletal animation, we have to start with the image of the character in question. Now, we're going to use this Flamingo as our mascot for an introductory to 2D skeletal animation with Creature. And the beauty about skeletal animation is you can actually animate with a single image. So this saves you a lot of time instead of having to draw each pose frame by frame. So that's one of the big advantages of skeletal animation. Now, before we begin, the first thing you need to do is to break up your character into the various body parts that you do want to animate for this character. So this flamingo over here, as you can see, I have the head, the neck, the body, and the legs. And in this next screen, you can see I've actually broken up this character into its various body parts, right? So I've broken up the two legs into separate regions, and I've added a couple of feathers. You'll see in a moment, much later in the tutorial, why we're doing this, but in general, it's a very good idea to break up your character into different body parts in preparation for skeletal animation. You can also do this in Photoshop. Now in Creature also allows you to import in a raw PSD or Photoshop format. But for the purposes of this introductory tutorial, we're keeping things extremely simple. So all you need to do is to take your original character here and then use whatever tools you have in Photoshop or in GIMP or whatever paint program and just separate out the different body parts, right? And then lay them out into this is what we call a texture atlas. So you have your whole character with the individual body parts disassembled into its own region, right? And then you export this entire image as a PNG image with transparency. And then we will import this into the creature animation tool, and we'll then start creating the rig for this character and then animating this character. So overall process, first start up with the texture atlas of body parts, then we'll feed it into the meshing mode to create the different region meshes, and then we're going to create the skeleton of the character, which will then finally be fed into the animation mode to actually animate our flamingo. We're going to go through each of these steps very carefully to get to the final intended result, so let's get started. Okay, so welcome to Creature. We're going to start off by creating a new project by clicking Create Project. Now, there are three options: Image Atlas, PSD document, or a 3D mesh. We're going to start with an image atlas because that's what we have for this tutorial. The first thing we do is to define the project folder. So give it a name, any name. This is going to be the directory or folder that's going to store all your character animation files for Creature. And then we're going to pick the texture atlas, which is that flamingo atlas we had containing the body parts of the flamingo. Now we click Create, and that will give us a new Creature project. Creature automatically creates all the body part meshes for you. You don't have to do anything. It should just come in and it just works. Now, there's many options to customize these meshes. They're more advanced, but I'll go through them really quickly. You can actually remesh the whole set of meshes, by clicking on the remeshing button and then giving it a new resolution like what I'm showing you here. Again, you don't need to do this, but I'm demonstrating it to show you there's other customization options for meshes as well. So in this case, I'm actually increasing the resolution of the meshes. You can see the meshes are now of a higher resolution. Also, if you don't like that, you can also define your own polygonal meshes in Creature. So Creature actually allows you to draw a boundary or outline along the region or body part of your character, and then after the polygon has been closed, it will actually triangulate the entire outline or polygon for you to give you a new region mesh. So that's another option. This is a more advanced option, so I encourage you to take a look at the other Creature tutorials, more advanced tutorials, to learn how to do it. So back to the original setup, we're going to rename all mesh regions to the correct names for the body parts. So click on the mesh item in the list box and then type in the new name. Now, if you use the PSD import option, Creature will actually automatically name all your body parts correctly based on your layer naming convention. Please check tutorials on the PSD import section for more information on that as well. Once all the body parts have been named, before we continue to rigging, I want to tell you that you can also filter out your mesh regions very easily by typing the substring of the name into the text box over here, and you can then easily search through the highlighted items for the mesh regions you care about. Okay, so time to rig the character. Click on the rig menu item, and then let's add in all the mesh regions we have for the Flamingo by clicking on the add regions button, and then let's select all the mesh regions we have by clicking select all and then clicking done. So this will add in all the mesh regions of the Flamingo into the scene. Now it's a matter of just selecting each mesh region and then dragging it into place. That's all it is. You can do many things in this mode as you place the regions around. You can rotate the mesh regions, you can scale them, and you can position them. Also, I want to add that if you're using the PSD import option, Creature will also automatically give you the option to place the mesh regions based on your layers automatically. So look up tutorials on that if you are interested. Now, as you can see, I am actually placing the feathers here, orienting them, rotating them, just to give them the pose I want, and you can do the same thing with your character. It's quite easy with Creature in the rigging mode. You'll also see in a moment I'm going to duplicate an extra feather to make the pose more dramatic, and we're going to animate the feathers with Creature's procedural motor system. So here I am duplicating a feather. I click on the duplicate button, and that gives me an extra feather, which I can then use to stick on the bird, as they say, and then put it in the right spot, so we can actually give it some secondary, really cool physics secondary motion when we start animating this character. Okay, so that's it, and then we can also change the order of the mesh regions by dragging them around, as you can see what I'm doing here in the list box. So this allows you to easily reorder the elements, the mesh regions, the layers in your character in rigging mode. So that's really it. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is actually creating the skeletal structure of this character by going to bone mode. So let's click on bone mode and start creating the skeleton of this Flamingo. Okay, so next we're going to create a bone. We're going to press Alt-C and drag our mouse like so, and then release it. That will create a bone in the direction you want. Continue this process for the rest of the character. So here I'm going to be creating the bones that you see here for the body and the neck of this Flamingo. Now take note, each new bone created is going to be the child of the previous bone. In other words, the previous bone is going to become the parent of the currently created bone. So if you want to create a bone under new parent, you have to back out from this mode by pressing Alt-S into bone selection mode, like what I'm going to do now. I'm going to pick the root bone as the new parent, and then go back Alt-C again to create bones for the rest of the character. So I'm going to create bones for the tail end of this character right now. Now you notice the design or structure of the bones I'm laying out right now is like a chain of bones, and I'm going to create actually a chain of bones for the different feathers or feather meshes of this character. The reason why I'm doing this is because I actually want them to dangle and flop around in a really cool way using secondary motion. We are going to do that automatically using Creature's very powerful procedural motor system, which you'll see in a moment. But for now, we're going to lay out the overall structure first. So the two keywords, hotkeys you want to have are Alt-S and Alt-C. Alt-S gives you bone selection, Alt-C gives you bone creation. So you would typically Alt-S select a parent bone, and then Alt-C, and then just start dragging around a bunch of bones you want to create, and then select a new parent bone again by pressing Alt-S, like what I'm doing right now, and then go on and create another new chain of bones. There are quite a few chain of bones I'm going to be creating for these feathers because I want the overall secondary motion effect to be very dramatic, very lively, and very cool. So you can see I'm creating another final extra set of bones for the feathers, and I think that should conclude that should be enough bones for our flamingo. Okay, so this is mostly there, but we haven't had the bones for the legs. So we're going to create the bones for the legs. Again, Alt-S, right? And I want them to be parented under this bone. So I'm going to select this bone over here close to the body, which is actually the main body bone. I'll select that, and then Alt-C, and start creating 2 bones each for each leg. So each leg is going to have 2 bones, a very simple leg structure. We're going to use IK or inverse kinematics to drive the leg bones. Again, you'll see later how we do it in animation mode. You can obviously have more bones for the legs, but in this, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to stick to just 2 bones each for each leg. Right, so it's mostly done except just a little finessing. So I'm going to adjust some of one of the leg bones slightly to make it more evenly distributed along the length of the leg. And that's basically it. That's basically all we have for the bone structure of this bird. Take note, you can also actually adjust the visualization sizes of the bone to aid visualization by adjusting the bone size slider on the right hand side of the panel. You can see how I'm doing here, and that's basically it. Okay, and then once we're done, we can move on to bone weighting, which is how the bones influence the mesh, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so click on the mesh weighting button to go into mesh bone weighting mode. We're going to assign the mesh regions to the bones so we know which bones are affected by which meshes. Click on the all button, and then in this window we can actually select which meshes are affected by which bones. You can switch between them and tell Creature, like say the tail bones should affect the tail regions, and the head or beak region should be affected by the head bones, and so on and so forth. So go ahead and assign the correct bones to influence the particular mesh region you want, or you can just make it influence all the mesh regions if you want that as well. Now, there are various modes to actually paint weights on the mesh regions. That's what we're going to do next. There is the manual mode, the traditional mode, which allows you to actually paint weights on it. Let me show you in a moment. There it is. If we click on the manual mode, we can actually move our mouse over and just click and drag and paint weights on the mesh. We can smooth them out by clicking the smooth button as well. And also you can erase the weights by holding Alt-C or setting the weight value to 0 to erase your current weights. That's the traditional way of painting weights. But Creature has auto modes, auto mesh weighting modes, which are much more powerful and simpler. So we're going to use that in this tutorial. Right, next we're going to use the power of group bone assignment and auto weighting to quickly weigh this character. So first, hold Control and click on a set of bones, then click on the group assignment button. So this allows you to actually assign a group of bones to a set of mesh regions really quickly. So click on any region you care about and group assign it, and you are done. Now go to another bone by holding down the Shift key and then clicking on it. This switches to another bone, and then hold down the Control key to select a group of bones. There you go, and then click on the group assignment button to again group assign to a set of regions you care about. So this allows you to quickly assign a group of bones to a whole bunch of influence mesh regions. Once you're done with that, it's time to weigh the bones. So again, group select by holding on the Control key and then just click apply for using the auto mesh weighting mode. And with a single click, we have automatically weighted those bones. Super quick, right? Super easy. Now I'll do the same thing for the other leg. Apply, and we are done. Wasn't that super fast? So let's repeat this process again. Let's weigh the rest of the character's body parts. So now hold on Shift. Let's switch to the body bones like so. And then we are going to hold down the Control key and then mass select these bones. I'm going to select the neck bones in this case, and we're going to actually group assign these bones to the body mesh region. But before we do that, I'm going to select more bones by holding down the control key again. The back of the body also should be assigned to the body mesh, right? So more bones, click on the group assignment button, again select the body mesh region, click on select once single if you care about one single mesh region like we're doing so, click on done, and that automatically assigns it. Super fast and super easy. And then once we are happy with what we have, we mass select those bones again by holding down the control key and then selecting those bones we care about. And then finally, we're going to click on the apply button, same thing what we did before, to automatically let creature apply or paint weights automatically for us for mesh bone weighting. There, done. That was super fast. Now we're going to repeat again the same process for the feathers. Some side notes on the auto weighting mode. Auto weighting has two sliders you can play with, radius and influence. Radius determines the area in which the auto weighting has to actually apply the auto weighting weights, and then influence determines how those weights actually flow into the neighboring vertices of the radius, the areas of influence. So feel free to play around with those two sliders to actually change the way the auto weighting applies its automatically painted weights on your mesh regions. The full documentation is online, as well as tutorials in the more advanced tutorial section of the YouTube channel. So again, feel free to check those out as well if you want to understand more of how auto weighting works. With the character properly weighted, let's go into testing mode by clicking on the test button, and then we can then go in and drag our bones around to see how our character mesh actually responds to different bone transformations. Now, testing mode is a very important tool. I think it's extremely useful because it allows you as the designer or artist to actually test out the results of your constructed rig. You can test it out to see if your bones were defined correctly, your mesh was weighted properly, your skeleton has the correct hierarchy, and so on and so forth. I highly encourage you to actually use Creatures testing mode to verify your skeleton, your mesh weighting before going to animation mode, so you can actually fix any potential bad weighting or incorrect skeletal definition issues in your animation asset. So again, use the testing mode for sort of a initial QA before you start animating your character. Once you're happy with it, we can start animating our character. Right, so let's go to animate mode, click on animate, and then let's start animating. Very exciting. Let's start with the basics, keyframe animation. So all you need to do is click on the bone you care about, whatever bone you want, and then just rotate it or drag it around, translate it, creature auto keys, so it will actually automatically set a keyframe at the current frame you're on, and then scrub through the timeline, jump to another keyframe you care about, make it, give it the character a different pose, and you're set. See? That's all you need to do, and now I have my character animated, interpolating very smoothly between two poses. There's also hotkeys, like so. So it allows me to actually step or jump between the different frames. That's all it is. So if you wanted to do traditional keyframe animation, you are set with Creature. However, we're going to use Creature's very powerful procedural motor system to make this Flamingo walk. So stay tuned, let's see what we're going to do. Okay, so on to Creature's procedural motor system. The motor system allows you to install what we call motors onto a group of selected bones or meshes. Now, the motors actually will perform a set of cool actions or animated behaviors on the selected bones or meshes, and they range anything from walking motion, IK, floppy secondary action, etc. There's a whole wide variety of behavior that these motors can do. So what I'm going to do right now is select those two group bones, those two leg bones on the Flamingo, and then I'm going to move my mouse over and click on the Install Motor button, which will then give me a list like so, like you see, a list of bone motors I can install on these two leg bones. I am going to install what we call an IK rotate motor. and that allows me to actually auto-generate some kind of pseudo bird walking action. You'll see in a moment what it does. It's super cool. Okay, so out of the box, this is the behavior we get from the IK rotate motor. Pretty cool, but that's not what we want. But don't worry, we have a whole bunch of properties we can tweak. We can change the direction of the IK motor, so that's more like a bird pose. And then we can also change the speed, so the leg actually walks in the correct direction that the bird is facing. I can also drag the point around to make sure it's rotating around the right point. There's a whole bunch of properties that are documented online for these different motors. Here I'm going to adjust the scale bottom so that it actually rotates around its half arc now. It's a very powerful motor. All properties and attributes are documented online, so I encourage you to go online to read up on what this motor does and others as well. But essentially what I'm tweaking right now is the IK direction, the speed, and the scale bottom, so this leg actually rotates in the right pose. I'm going to do the same thing with the other leg as well. Install the IK rotate motor, tweak the direction, the speed, and the scale bottom, so it's more like a walking cycle, right? So by tweaking these various parameters, I get like a synchronous sort of leg cycle, right? But it's not true walking yet. In order to accomplish that, I'm going to tweak what we call the phase. So phase is going to offset the animation. I'm going to set a value to like 0.8 or 9 or 1, and there you have it. Now I actually have a walk cycle done in no time at all using the power of the IK rotate motor system. Next, we want to give the character a lively bouncing gait. So we're going to install a move bounce motor on the root bone. So pick the root bone and click move bounce motor. Here is the default action from the move bounce motor. It's hilarious, don't worry. Let's set the amplitude X to 0 so it doesn't go left and right. Great. And then let's reduce the amplitude Y so it doesn't bounce too much vertically as well. Right, so that's more like it. Now we can tweak other parameters. We can set the min y to 0 so it doesn't bounce below the negative axis, right? And then we can also increase the speed of the bounce so it matches the walking motion. So that's more like it. That's more natural. There you go. That's what you have. That's what we're expecting. And finally, let's just increase the amplitude y, the vertical bounce, to give it more of a bounce, more liveliness. And I think that should be good enough for our current walking motion. That's more like it. And feel free to play around with the parameters to get something that you like. Right, so now we're going to do the neck. So for the neck, we're also going to use a move bounce motor. And so we want a bobbing action for the head of the bird. So select the neck bones, click on the IK rotate motor, and we get, again, something really hilarious. Don't worry, we can tweak those parameters. First thing we're going to do is to reduce the amplitude Y so the bird doesn't bob its head vertically too much, but just horizontally, because that's the kind of bobbing action we want. And it's still pretty funny, but don't worry, we're going to tweak it more. There's a whole bunch of parameters we can tweak. We can tweak the speed, we can tweak the phase, etc., etc. So by going in and adjusting the various things like the target position, the speed, the amplitude X and Y, you can actually get a pretty natural bobbing action like what we have here already, right? So now the bobbing action of the head of the bird is matching more to the walking gait of the bird. And I'm just going to adjust the target position just a bit so it actually arches the back in a nicer pose as well for this bird. Okay, so next I'm going to install what we call band physics motors on the feathers. Super exciting. So I'm actually going to give the feathers secondary motion and make them flop very naturally following the gait of the character. Now, these band physics motors have two parameters you care about: stiffness and damping. Stiffness will control how much the feather flops or flops easily under conditions, and damping will control how the energy is bled out of the physics system. In other words, if you want the feathers to flop a bit less, you increase the stiffness. If you wanted to flop more, you decrease the stiffness. And if you wanted to make it more flowy, you increase the damping. That's really all it is. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how the procedural physics actually work, please watch another tutorial on this YouTube channel which teaches you all about these very powerful physics motors. But what you need to know now is, as you see what we're doing here, is you can get some really compelling secondary motion of of feathers on this bird without actually too much effort. We just go in right now. What we're doing, tweak some parameters, install them, and then we can get these flowy flopping feathers with almost no effort. So here I have bend physics installed on all the various feathers of the bird. I think it's pretty compelling, to be honest, and this is done in very, very little time, in minimal effort, which is what we want, right? I'm going to do the same thing and add just a little more panache to the animation by adding a bend physics as well to the neck bones of this character. So go install and then bend physics on the flamingo as well, and this will just make the neck a bit more floppy. There you go, just a bit more natural secondary motion. So it's more like an organic character. It's not like a robotic character, but organic character, right? So here we are. Here's our flamingo animation. This is done with fully with Creature's procedural animation system, and we actually got this really cool walking flamingo in a very, very short amount of time. This is how powerful Creature's procedural animation is, and I hope you enjoyed this introductory tutorial to Creature.